is Grace, and you're listening to the Homebody Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome. As of right now, it is the Winter Solstice 2025 when this little episode comes out, and I wanted to put more of a bow on the end of the podcast for the year. There was a gap in early December, and as many of you know, a lot of my energy was going to creating and producing a free masterclass for you all called Virgin. And many of you came and took part in it, which was wonderful, seeing all of your faces. And Virgin was a free to the public masterclass that was hosted by my Ma membership, which some of you are now in, and I'm so thrilled to have you and excited for all the things that we're going to integrate in and learn and turn on in 2026. If you missed Virgin Live, it is no longer free, but you can sign up for the replay masterclass at the link below in the show notes. It was very powerful, timely, and the word ignition came up over and over again as people shared about their experiences. And I hope that whether you take it or not, that you will ignite and tend the flame inside of you, which is also related to what we're going to talk about today in this little bow of a podcast for the end of the year. I love the winter solstice. This is my favorite time of year. I feel so nourished by the dark. I love that it gets dark at 5 o'clock in the evening and it's dark in the morning when you wake up. And I just deeply look forward to the cave time for some deep visioning and preparing for what I feel like is the mission and the vision for the next year. So this is the last episode of 2025. We'll be taking a break and not publishing again until the end of January or February. We already have some great guest interviews lined up for you and a series that I'm working on for some solo episodes, and you can expect that towards February in 2026. And this episode has been sitting with me for a few weeks now, and it feels like the sentiment that I want to leave with you as we head through this underground dark until the spring. And I wanted to talk about this path to freedom, or this thread of an aspect of freedom that on the outside looks like failure. And failure is something that most of us try to avoid in our creative endeavors, our business projects, our relationships. We literally try to engineer failure out of the realm of possibility, to the point where oftentimes what we're doing, how we're doing it, becomes solely driven by avoiding failure. And again, fine, most people are doing this. And if one is being motivated by avoiding failure, driven by fear of failure, then you actually can't be fueled by desire or devotion or anything else because you're being fueled by fear. And I failed many times at a lot of things. I've gone into projects being like, failure is absolutely not an option, and then eventually utterly humiliated at the level of failure I managed to be in, and I'm sure I will fail more in the future. And for whatever reason in this life, it's a topic that I've spiraled back around many, many times. This idea of failure in some instances, in such dramatic or life-changing ways that I feel I'm beginning to understand how failure can be a gift. And in the gene keys, each key is like a prism. Depending on how you're relating to this particular key or this frequency, that prism could be experienced as a shadow or a gift or as a siddhi. And siddhi being a Sanskrit word that it doesn't really translate into English, but you could roughly describe a siddhi as a supernatural or extraordinary gift that can only come from some level of like enlightened experience or divine intervention or understanding. So with each key, depending on how you're orienting to the particular sphere or energetic thread, you could experience it as failure, the shadow, or preservation, the gift, or veneration, the siddhi. And I have this gene key, which is number 32, very prominent in my chart in this particular system, that I think is a very beautiful system. And I think Richard Rudd has really woven an exquisite, mystical, hermetic masterpiece that I return to again and again. It's something that I continue to contemplate and let nourish me. But this gene key 32, it is very prominent in my map. So I've contemplated it in particular a lot over the past several years, in addition to orienting and reorienting to past failures in my own life as I attempt to integrate them and heal, as I try to get more perspective around what has this frequency taught me? What is it trying to give me? And I found that ultimately it's taught me so much and also freed me so much. I've been able to understand that failure taught me in these instances so much more than success ever could have. And sometimes when you're succeeding, you haven't yet liberated yourself from the fear of failure. And so even though you're succeeding super hard, there's still this looking around the corner all the time of what if I fail? What if I fail? Afraid if I fail? What if I fail? Who would I be if I failed? What if you fail? What if? For me, I found that there's so many failures. Each time, each go around has stripped something off of me that I thought was really essential to who I was and what I absolutely needed. And it turns out that they weren't things that I needed, and the qualities weren't essential to who I was. And as those things have been stripped off one by one, I found that more and more of what's left is actually just veneration, because all of the other motivations and fears and survival energies that were driving me got stripped away in the crucible of failure. And I'm sure there's more, and I'm sure it will happen again. But I now deeply understand that failure is not the end of the thing unless you stop transforming. And I don't think the opposite end of the spectrum is success, that actually failure and success is not the polarity here. And I do think increasingly, and I experience what the Gene Keys is proposing, that the opposite end of the spectrum is veneration. That there's no other reason to keep going except that veneration of your heart that insists that you carry on and transform and keep going. A story I've heard Richard Rudd tell as it relates to this gene key is about this man who just goes out every day planting trees. And the trees grow tall, and his home is surrounded by a forest, and then a fire comes and a lot of the trees burn down. And yet he goes out planting trees, and then they grow again, and some are very tall and some are very young, and some survive, and then there comes a war and a lot of the trees are destroyed. And then he goes out every day planting trees, going well. Some of them are bearing fruit, some of them are new again, and a couple have managed to be old. And then someone comes and plows down half of the forest and builds a neighborhood. And that he just goes out planting trees. And that actually what the story is modeling is that like what's going on the outside doesn't actually matter. He simply does what he is doing because he's devoted to the forest, to the trees. If success were driving him, he would have stopped, probably around fire number 2. If outcomes were what he needed to keep going, he probably would have quit. But that's not why he's doing it. He does it because it is what he does. He does it because it is who he is. He does it because it is what he venerates. And because there is this internal embodiment of veneration, which sounds something like, I do this because I am here and this is mine to do, and I desire it, and that is all the reason I need. How else could I worship what is mine to desire? And that's enough. It's so enough, in fact, that it becomes the only driving force. And so if we're looking at the goals and the outside, we'd be looking at this person saying, what a buffoon, has spent his whole life planting trees and it still doesn't look like Jurassic Park behind his house. What a waste of time. What a failure. But he knows something that the critics don't, is that he's tapped into this wellspring that never runs dry and that feeds and feeds and feeds him and the world, and is actually such a pure, beautiful expression that I think is at the heart of creativity, which is, I embody my veneration, therefore I do this. the end. And as a friend reminded me recently, I say the end a lot, and I mean it as an emphatic simplification, but also the end is the beginning. And when this is the case, that actually it's not in service of success or the outcome or a guarantee, but that I just embody my veneration, then you can't fail. The fire that burns it down isn't a failure. Someone building the neighborhood over your well-tended forest isn't a failure. It might be grief, though, because you will carry on regardless, and your veneration is what is most real, and because of that, your doing is free, and your being is free. And when this is the fuel that's running the engine and burning the oil of being and doing, you see that failure isn't real. And if anything, it's merely a punctuation in the middle of a long, long sentence because you carry on. Because in this way of being, veneration is the metabolic force that can digest and transform and use anything as oil to fuel the flame that's already there. That's the alchemical promise. That's the ongoing alchemical invitation. And if we don't ever free ourselves from this, then we'll stay trapped in the fear of failure. Our fear will be trapped by the fear, and we'll be driven just to avoid bankruptcy, to avoid letting people down, to avoid looking like a buffoon, to avoid being misunderstood, to avoid whatever the thing is. And it's understandable. And if we're looking at it just from the outside, from a purely muggle, mundane, evidence-based situation, all of that makes sense. The man that goes out planting trees every day looks ridiculous. But again, he knows something that we don't, which is the secret of veneration. And we can be gifted, perhaps, with the experience of failure so that we can meet ourselves in it and become changed, and then the fear can be gone because we see that any part of us that we could lose in that process isn't actually us. And then we're not trying to not fail, and we're not making choices to avoid fear, and we're not doing things just to resist what we dislike, because we all know that what you resist persists, and the thing that you fear and can't look at and resist, the farther and farther and faster you run, the bigger and badder and closer it gets. But if you enable yourself to be changed and stripped in the failure, you realize that you are more clearly able to find the sparkle of the flame of veneration. You're not even trying to succeed anymore. You're simply venerating the flame as best as you know how, which becomes so pure and earnest and rewarding because you can't fail. It becomes quite simple what you're doing and who you're being. All the static is gone and the song can come through. And it's not secretly you think devotion will get you the thing, so you get super devoted so that then you will succeed. Success doesn't drive anymore. Veneration does, and they're not the same. What's driving is honoring the thread, the flame, the thing that you've been entrusted with seeing and devoting yourself to, and letting it change you. And as you let it change you, you see it differently, and you become more and more this living flame, this burning flame of veneration that's incapable of failure or success, because you understand that that's not actually the game that you're even playing. It's burning with devotion or not. And when I look back and think, wow, I'm so lucky, I'm so grateful that shit didn't work out. Even at the time, I really wanted it to work out, and I thought that I was going to die because it didn't. And in a way, I did die each time. And I'm so grateful for who that's made me. Because the thing that burns inside me couldn't burn as brightly and clearly unless I had failed and lost the dreams and had the shit smeared all over my face and the heartbreak and the confusion and the ridiculous mistakes. There's shit that I'm so grateful it didn't work out. It would have been so easy. And does some of it still break my heart a little bit? Yeah, it does. It would have been so easy, though, had it worked out, and I wouldn't know any of what I know now. I wouldn't feel as free as I am now in how I relate to reality and life and how I spend my energy and my time, which is veneration. less and less bound by fear or shoulds or I must do this or else, because the or else can and does happen. And so then what? The driving force can become freed to be the GPS steering towards veneration, and you can't help but being in veneration. And so you go towards it, not because it's a destination and not because you will succeed in reaching it, because it's not a destination and there is no success, but there's something more ongoing going on now. That actually you will always be successful because you can't fail at veneration, the flame that can never be taken away, never go out, never run dry, a purpose that you can't not succeed. And if it took failure to get that, well, then let's do it again. And I'm sure it will, except now I know it's not failure. Failure simply becomes transforming on the go, fuel for the self-generating fire of the veneration. And if we get to the root of the word veneration, where it's like this collision of profound reverence and desire and goddess coming together, it's the only way that could have become the flame and the motivation driving the car, because in the failure, all the other ones got lost in the collateral, consumed in the flames. And now I see that veneration, the reverence, the desire, and the goddess together were the flames burning me in the failure so that I could get to this, to her, to it, and to where that's enough. And now what's possible if failure and success aren't even on the spectrum? What other game have we unlocked now? There's a way that life loved me enough to upset my plans and make sure that I didn't succeed, so I wouldn't still be trapped by thinking that it's all about success and I must succeed or else. What a gift. And so, if you're looking for a way, potentially, that this could be food for life, or at least a thread to investigate, I'd love to invite you into contemplation. If you get really honest, because we love rigorous honesty over here where we can, what are the things that actually you're doing that are actually driven by fear? Fear of failure, fear of misunderstanding, fear of looking a certain way, or whatever it is. What are you trying to get to work? What are you maintaining? What are you holding on to? And when you get down to it, it's not because you actually want it or care about it or venerate it. It's actually because you can't fathom failure and what that would mean. And maybe observe that, or get interested in how that fear could be transformed and what getting more honest about it could empower you to become, could empower you to let go of. As we talked about in the masterclass, the virgin is she who is ruled only by devotion. She's not doing it because she's afraid of failure. She's doing it because devotion, the great yes that engulfs all other possibilities and stories and timelines, it has a lot of teeth. It actually isn't ooey gooey. Veneration doesn't mean you're just like, oh, I just think about things and I like candles all day because veneration. I love the candles. I love thinking about things all day, but it has a lot of teeth for transformation. Because you're no longer ruled by fear, the fear of failing, the fear of losing your friends if you do X or become Y. The virgin is what it takes and who you get to become when all the other shit that was ruling you is gone and now only devotion is left. And there's a lot of ways it can go. And we don't always need to go to Mordor to lose it in the fire, but sometimes we do need to see it and meet ourselves in that place and receive our nakedness there in order to see the who is really behind the mask there, and then unlock the real game that we actually could play. And then we play for the sake of the game, for the love of the game, and for the love of the story and who we get to be in it, which is veneration. And I wanted to finish with a little reading from an excerpt from the Tao Te Ching. What yields does not break. What listens outlasts what shouts. The mind tries to dominate reality. The way cooperates with it. The breath does not force the lungs. The earth does not hurry the seed. The quiet power is inexhaustible because it does not resist. Those who embody the way do not rush to be seen. They allow things to reveal themselves. They act at the right moment because they are not distracted by the need to act. Creation flows through stillness. Strength arises from openness. Those who learn to yield are never depleted. The gate of life is always open. Thank you for listening. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you, and I hope that I get to see more and more of your faces as we move into 2026. Like I mentioned at the beginning, if you're interested in the replay of the Masterclass of Virgin, you can find that in the link below in the show notes, and I'll also include a resource that I have that's very much inspired by this way that the Tao describes the deep alchemical feminine relation to the way, like the valley that receives life. And it's called Four Waterways for the Soul. And I'll include that in the show notes as well, in case you're interested in that, in case the tone and the truth of that tone feels like it would be restorative and easeful for you. I wish all of you peace. Everyone, be well. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. And I'll see you on the other side. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a few moments to subscribe to the show, leave us a review, and share the episode. These small tasks help our independent podcast so much. Be sure to also check out the show notes below to learn more about any resources, guests, or sponsors that we shared with you today. Our intro and outro music was created by artists Aaron Palovic and Jared Kelly. Our podcast logo was created by Elaine Stevenson, and this show is produced by Softer Sound Studio. Thank you for being here. Be well. Peace.